great, great, great pleasure to introduce to you Beth Pratt, who is the California Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation and leader of the Save LA Cougars campaign. I'm so grateful that Beth has generously agreed to share her passion for mountain lions with us. Mountain lions are such an iconic animal for us here in California. And the most iconic of them all is P22, who decided to make the 8 square miles of Griffith Park his home in the midst of a county with 10 million people. Unfortunately, it's been a little lonely for P22 because it's really difficult and dangerous for a female mountain lion to get across the freeway to have a date with P22. So tonight, we're going to learn about how we can be better neighbors of P22 and his family of mountain lions in the Santa Monica Mountains and surrounding areas by better understanding their needs and supporting construction of the wildlife at Liberty Canyon. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our speaker tonight, Beth Pratt. Let's give her a round of applause. We can do it like this because you're on mute.
Well, let me thank you, David, for asking me and having me. And let me just give that applause right back as, you know, sort of on again, off again, but pretty loyal Sierra Club member for my whole 30 plus years in California. It's a great organization. Today, you announced you were part of the plaintiffs bringing suit to protest the delisting of wolves off the ESA list. So thank you. And Michael Brune, actually your leader is a friend of mine. We serve on a board together, but it's such a great organization. So thank you for having me. And I apologize. I have terrible lighting in my office at night. I didn't notice it until the time changed this fall, but it's pretty dark in here. So sorry if I look like I'm coming to you from a haunted house. The other disclaimer I'll give is I have 5 dogs and a cat, and they always like to make an appearance on the Zoom. So they will be part of the show at some point. I just can't predict when. But David, I want to echo, it's been, 2020 has been a heck of a year. And one of my favorite tweets recently was, well, we did the 7-day trial on 2021 and we'd like to take it back. Obviously, there's a lot going on. And sometimes I get asked, well, why are you still working on the crossing and wildlife? Isn't there other priorities? And of course there are, but I think, they're all priorities. The mountain lions especially are not on pause because of COVID or any other things going on. Their extinction timeline is still, going. The clock is still ticking. And I think the other thing, there's not too much good to come out of this pandemic, but how people were connecting to wildlife in different ways was really encouraging to me. So I think it just showed that wildlife's health, both biologically is tied to our own health. As we know, one of the reasons for a pandemic is a lack of habitat and a lack of connectivity, but also psychologically, wildlife is tied to our health. And it was great getting people who never paid attention to wildlife calling me up and asking me about bird song or what type of squirrel they saw there. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but to me, that's been wonderful to watch unfold. So I just wish it didn't take a pandemic to do it. So I'm going to talk about the wildlife crossing tonight. And let's see, I actually, since we're all home more, had sort of a presentation I retooled. So you guys are the first one I'm sort of doing the new format, which is a little different. I used to tell the story of P22 first, but everybody knows that. So I kind of put it in the middle. So you guys are my guinea pigs for sort of a new formatted presentation. So you can let me know how you think it works. But let me see if I can first share it. My technical skills sometimes. Everybody seeing the Save LA Cougars? Good. And then, okay.
Looks good.
Like is this? Let's see. Oh, I can't get it to format right. Okay. Well, here we go. So Yeah, I have the best job in the world. I am the California Regional Executive Director for the for the National Wildlife Federation. And so what that means is I get to oversee all their conservation work for California. And most of my time, though, has been sort of taken up by the Cruise campaign. It's just been, it's just such a monumental project. It's, you know, I haven't actually, my poor fox and porpoise guys are like, why don't you spend time with us? So I sort of define my life these days as, you know, pre-crossing and crossing and then post-crossing, where I can, you know, get back to some other stuff. But I wouldn't have it any other way. This is, I think, one of the most significant conservation projects of our time. I just did a talk with Doug Smith of the Yellowstone Wolf Project, who's a friend, and he's one of my conservation heroes. And I was teasing him. I said, oh, you know, you got to say the wolves were one of the most, you know, biggest conservation successes of the time. But we're right below you, I think. And I don't say that just because I'm working on it, but what we're trying to do here with this crossing's never been done before. So let's, oh, no, what did I do? Okay, can you still see my screen? Huh. What are you seeing on the screen? I'm seeing Zoom.
Yes, that's,
Huh. Let's see. I think somebody else is sharing their screen.
okay. Okay, let's see who's doing that.
Here, I'm gonna try it again. There we go, share.
There we go.
Okay, cool. Well, you know, the Zoom could have been just as cool. So what are we talking about here? Well, let's start off with what I think what's, you know, important to everybody, which is the kittens. Let me just play this, and my dogs will probably bark because of the noise. I mean, like to put the mountain lions front and center because they are, although I'll get into that, this crossing is not just for mountain lions. They are the one that are most at risk immediately, or at least in the short term, for extinction if we don't do something. And we just released this fall some new visualizations as we're advancing into more and more detailed design of what this crossing will look like. And so I'm starting to lead with these because these, as somebody who's been working on this for almost a decade, to see this get more real has been really incredible. And you can see these are, you know, this will be an extension of the ecosystem coming across the 101. Pretty much, you know, when we put the 101 in, we didn't know it, but we pretty much cut the Santa Monica Mountains off from the rest of the world. And this, in the last 1,600 feet, we can pretty much do it because it's the last 1,600 feet in the area that has protected space on both sides. We're gonna try to right that wrong. And here are some, again, these new visualizations. This is my favorite because it really shows you how, you know, these aren't just bridges. This is bringing the landscape, a living bridge over the freeway, and sort of reconnecting the nose of the mountain that we tore off when we put the 101 in. So to me, this is really exciting. So those who've been following this project, you know, you've been seeing some of the same conceptions for years because that's all we had based on where we were in the design process. But it's getting pretty incredible to be able to share these. I do like to point out every wildlife crossing has different goals. Some of you have seen the Utah crossing that went viral, which was amazing, right? You had, you know, all that footage of animals crossing it. You know, their goal was not to reconnect an ecosystem. Their goal was to fix what they call a slaughter alley, which is, you know, the big animals were getting hit. And you could see they also had a much smaller road. We have 10 lanes and an access road. I think they had 4 lanes. So, you know, our problem is at this site. Now, it's not that it's not elsewhere. Animals are not getting hit as much. The freeway is such a barrier that the animals actually sort of turn around, and what that's creating is genetic isolation. And again, not just for the mountain lions, it's for all wildlife. So we are creating a living ecosystem on top that animals will live on, and animals large and small can travel on, and plants. We don't think of flora needing connectivity, but it does. So this is something that is going to benefit all wildlife. And I don't know if it might be a little hard to see on your screen, but if you could look way down there, there's a western fence lizard trying to cross the road. And I do, yeah. I mean, I did pick him up and put him back. But, I like to remind that wildlife, large and small, is challenged by our freeways. The mountain lions are the most territory needy, so they're the ones, again, that are showing the impacts most significantly right now. But no wildlife is immune from what we're doing with roads and development. As Mary Ellen Hannibal wrote in her book, nature doesn't work without connection. And listen, when I was coming up in my biology field and starting to work in the environment and conservation, we didn't know that. This is 30 years ago now. It was, I've worked in both Yosemite and Yellowstone National Park, and that was the thinking. You put aside a Yosemite, you put aside a Yellowstone, done, wildlife is protected. We now know that doesn't work. Even on these best protected places on the planet, the wildlife is having a hard time. And part of that is connectivity. They don't look at boundaries, and healthy, resilient populations need connection to each other. Once you start creating these islands, it doesn't work. We also know the number one threat to wildlife worldwide is a loss of habitat. So if we don't start making these ecological connections, even in places that you might not think they should be, like LA, right? It's no longer okay just to say wildlife's going to be good if we put aside land that is protected for them. We need them to be able to move through our spaces, and so that it's definitely a huge shift in conservation biology and conservation thinking, but it has shifted, let me tell you. And this is the reality if we don't do it. I don't like to show a lot of these photos, but I have started showing them that when you put a magnificent, beautiful mountain lion on a road up against a car, the car wins. And, we can fix this, though. I think, for me, that's the good news. P32 is an example of this. So, the Santa Monica Mountains has a healthy population of mountain lions. The Santa Monica Mountains also has plenty of open space for mountain lions. It's not that there's a shortage of open space, it's that there's a shortage of connected open space for them. P32, this cat was pretty special to me because it was one of the first cats when I got involved. They sort of tracked since, a youngster, and did what a good mountain lion should do. When he got to about 1 to 2 is when they disperse. Mountain lions are solitary creatures. They don't live in prides like African lions. If you see mountain lions together, safe bet is it's a mother and her offspring, who sometimes can be as big as her before they disperse. They don't share territory except for, males will let, obviously females share, and some females will overlap a little bit, but males generally will fight or fight to the death for a territory. They also have extremely large home ranges, 100 square miles, 150 square miles. And so to find a new home can be pretty difficult, especially if you have to cross some freeways to do that. But look at what P32 did. He crossed the 101, he crossed the 23, he crossed the 118, he crossed the 126. Boy, he was making it, only to meet his demise on the 5. So, this is what's happening. He did what a mountain lion should do, and would have been fine if it wasn't for our roadways. And here he is when they were working him up. So, the reality is these cats are trapped by these freeways. And this map, although it's a little dated, shows each color circle is a home range of a mountain lion. And this, to me, demonstrates in a really good way what the problem is. First of all, you'll note, again, those colors are all defined. It might be a little hard to see, but by freeways. The boundaries are of their home ranges that these are all representing is the freeway. So that's unnatural. They're also a bit smaller than mountain lion territories should be. So these guys are living on top of each other in a way that, mountain lions like up where I live outside Yosemite aren't so much because they can't get out of each other's way. So, these are, this is what we need to fix. The 101 is just become such an absolute barrier that mountain lions from the north can't come south to bring in new genetic material. They pretty much get to the freeway and turn around. And then the mountain lions south of the 101 can't get out to disperse freely. P22 was really one of the lucky ones. Most of the males do not make it out. They get killed. So this, again, is what we are trying to fix. What happened this summer, you can chalk it up to, 2020 to 2020 being just such a not a good year. We had some great news this summer, which was 5 different litters of kittens were discovered in the Santa Monica Mountains. So that was at least some good news, but it was coupled with some pretty bad news. The National Park Service, and they're the ones that do all the research on the mountain lions. We are guided on this project by the science. Why we need this is because these mountain lions are genetically declining. Where we put the crossing, all guided by the National Park Service's really incredible research that they've been doing for almost 2 decades now. And I joke with Jeff and Seth, who are the lead scientists, who are friends now too. They put out a number of research papers in 2016, 2018, all showing the genetic decline in that, it's going to be game over if we don't do something. And all their quotes, if you go back and, read the news stories at those times, was, we don't want to reach the low bar that the Florida Panthers did, which they were almost extinct, and they were starting to show genetic birth defects, right? And what happens this summer? Those birth defects that Jeff and Seth predicted as part of their research started showing up. I joke with Jeff and Seth, the headline should have been, "We told you so." We started seeing kinked tails in some of the mountain lions. Now, why is this significant? Well, in itself, obviously, a kinked tail might not, prevent a mountain lion from being successful. But what this points to is the end game, which is sterility, right? That these are pointing to that at some point it's getting bad enough that the next step is the mountain lions can't even breed. So this was alarming, and it just pointed to even more so the need for the wildlife crossing. I had one of our biggest, or a big skeptic about the crossing. He was kind of supportive, but I think didn't quite trust. Called me up after the Park Service released this news and said, "You know what? You guys were right. You said it was going to happen, and it happened." So again, I know a lot of these days, there's a lot of people who don't listen to science, but it works. And it's definitely, showing us what to do in this case. The other challenge I'll throw out there, which all of us are familiar with, up here where I live, I've had to evacuate 3 years in a row. The Creek Fire was only 15 miles down the road. And although I didn't have to evacuate, like a lot of you, was just coughing smoke all summer. But fire has introduced another challenge to these mountain lions that connectivity becomes important about too. Mountain lions are adapted to fire. They're a California species, right? And most of them can get out of fire's way. That's their adaptation. Some of them just are in the wrong place in the wrong time, like us humans are, which was P74 during the Woolsey fire, just sadly happened to be at ground zero. But what this fire does, which is a little sort of second step impacts, is it's taken away a lot of their habitats. So in the Woolsey fire, over 50% of the available open space was burned, and 79% of the National Park Service land. So again, if you're trapped by freeways and your little segment has burned, you don't have the option, or it's going to be a lot harder to get to the segment that hasn't, where there is still vegetation and deer. And then also, it's harder to escape the fire. This was P64, an incredible cat. Again, a cat that, I had been with the Park Service just following his adventures. He had learned how to cross a culvert under the 101, which was just unprecedented. He didn't die in the fire, but there was some evidence based on his GPS points and where he is that he couldn't get out of the burned areas because of the roads and traffic. So he ended up actually passing away in burnt paws 2 weeks after the Woolsey fire. So again, fire's just adding another complication, along with rodenticides. And luckily, we are having some state action on this. Governor Newsom, I was fortunate enough to be when he signed the executive order banning these, at least temporarily, until they do further study. But this is having an enormous impact on our wildlife, and P22 being no exception. So we have to solve the rodenticide issue too. We can get mountain lions across the freeway with the crossing, but we don't want them eating poison once they do so. So this is Liberty Canyon. I think many of you are familiar with it. You can, if you get on the 101 towards Ventura, if you're coming from LA, there's an exit. You can pull out. We actually have a future site sign. You can check it out. And so this is the sort of the corridor we're trying to connect. And this photo is a little misleading in that it looks like, wow, look at all that open space. But as you know, Calabasas is right there. And then you have, Agora and Thousand Oaks. So this is actually, like I said, the last 1,600 feet that we can even put a wildlife crossing. The biggest predictor of success, as we know from decades of science around what makes crossings work, you have to have protected space on both sides. You just can't let the animals cross to get to a site that isn't protected. This map too shows it all. What we have in the area, which to me is interesting, is it sort of funnels. If you're looking up top at Los Padres and the Simi Hills, Santa Susana's, and that sort of corridor of green space that wildlife can utilize funnels to that almost red dot again, that last 1,600 feet, and then opens up again once you get into sort of the Malibu area and the Malibu Creek State Park. So again, there's plenty of open space on both sides, but it just narrows down to almost nothing right there in the 101 because of all the development alongside the freeway. So that's sort of what we're doing. But I also talk a lot about how we're doing it, right? And as David at the beginning introduced P22. People have been talking about doing something in this area for a while, but talking about it in very scientific terms, like ecosystem resiliency and biodiversity matrix, and you name it. And for scientists, great, we all understand that language, but this was the game changer for me, and it really changed the way I approached my conservation work as well, which was, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. And you have this mountain lion living under the Hollywood sign who, is dateless and trapped by traffic and is probably never going to have a girlfriend. And all of a sudden you have the public will. It was really the story of this remarkable cat. And I love this video that was also taken. He's just such a beautiful cat. You usually don't see, the lights of the second largest city in the country when you look at videos or photos of mountain lions. So, it was his story that really captured people's imaginations. His journey, across two of the busiest freeways in the country, which, I'm scared driving on, never mind trying to cross them on foot, to find a home in Griffith Park and live among, this map to me shows it. He's not living, on the outskirts. He's living in the middle of the city, and the smallest known home range ever recorded for a male mountain lion. But perhaps not surprisingly, given he's kind of out of options there. This, although the Hollywood photo is, the most famous one, this is my favorite photo Steve Winter has taken of P22, because to me, this is what he's facing every night. So, girlfriends or having a mate may be overrated is probably the rationale he's going through, because he knows, having made that journey once, he might not survive it again. There's plenty of deer in Griffith Park, it seems like, especially since you have Forest Lawn Cemetery, which they can graze on, or all the gardens of people who live around it. So, he's definitely made a choice. And, we tend to think of wildlife as, generalities, that they just operate on instinct. Listen, I'm a scientist, but we now know from science, animals are individuals. They have emotional lives. They have, they make choices. Not all animals behave the same in the same circumstances. Not every mountain lion would have stayed in Griffith Park. Not every mountain lion might have, been as conflict-free with humans in Griffith Park. P22 definitely has a personality that he, his works to his advantage. And really, what choice does he have, right? So it's really this story, which I think so many people can sort of put in human terms, which is he's sort of cut off, the last of his kind, not going to have a girlfriend. And that is obviously emblematic, or he's sort of the poster child for what's happening with all the Santa Monica Mountains. A lot of them are cut off, or if they're getting girlfriends, it's girlfriends in their family, their daughters or granddaughters. And we all know how, bad inbreeding or incest is. So it's this story that has really fueled the imagination of people around the world, and is going to get this crossing built. So how we've approached this is we're having fun, and we want wildlife. We want people to connect to wildlife in fun ways. And, one of my favorite headlines about this is the wildlife mating bridge could bring more sexy time to California cougars, right? I think, what we've learned is, you can tell people they're bad. You're bad for driving cars. You're bad. But again, getting back to that, people have to love things to want to protect them. So we've really worked on connecting people to these mountain lions and to native wildlife in sort of some fun ways. And I thought I'd play this video from last year's P22 Day to sort of give you some flavor of our approach. So for those of you who saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, obviously that was a big riff off it. We actually had the young actress who, pretty much stole every scene from Leonardo DiCaprio, Julia Butters, at the festival herself. She's amazing. She's a really wonderful young person. But that's sort of, the tone we take. This is P22's Facebook page. I don't know how many of you follow him on Facebook, but I have a lot of fun with that. Don't tell anybody it is me. I won't give it up to my staff. It's too much fun. But we do a lot of posts, which, like this one, we show people what P22's poop looks like. It's all done in, in his voice, and people talk to him. Like, I love this one. You probably can't see it, but Ryan, this person responds, "I wonder what your poop looks like pretty much 24/7. Thanks, bro." So I love, people message P22 all the time. I love pretending I'm him and messaging back. But they're learning mountain lion behavior. Brad Pitt, we want Brad Pitt to be involved in this campaign. So my new tactic is I am calling out Brad Pitt in every, news story I talk about. And I love this reporter, Patrick, actually ended up using it as a headline. He didn't tell me until it went out. We do Who's Hotter, Brad Pitt or P22 polls. P22 handedly wins. But if any of you have a contact with Brad Pitt, we need the Brad Pitt of Brad Pitt to help out our mountain lion. But we engage a lot of celebrities. Jared Leto posed with our new P22 plushie, which is I'll get into. We do a lot of products. This is one of our more popular. It even has a tracking collar on it. My favorite actor of all times, Viggo Mortensen. I got to meet him and talk a little cougars with him. He loved the plushie. This was, I remember when that meme was going around, what was your last photo before shutdown, or your last, this was it. Sean Penn and his wife, Leela George, she's a big wildlife person, invited me to talk to the cougars about the cougars at a private fundraising event. And Sean Penn got up and said, "You're hearing it from me. Cougar inbreeding's bad." So they were really wonderful and really big wildlife folks. Our Governor Newsom, he has his dad William Newsom was instrumental in Prop 117, which is what protected mountain lions from sport hunting here. So he has a long legacy here. He is very supportive of this crossing. I was honored to be asked to give him a tour. We spent almost an hour. He had great questions. But this gets back at, as I said, the emotional connection. I don't know any other governor in any other state that would tweet out, a mountain lion will always have my heart, right? So, to me, that just gets at that getting things done, the science, all that needs to be there. But when you get a governor taking a selfie and pledging his love to P22, you're getting success. But to me, it's not so much the celebrities, it's everybody. This is not just an LA story and not just a California story. People connect to P22 all over the world, but the Angelinos especially, he's part of their life. And this was tricky to do, given that mountain lions and P22, most people are never going to see them. So how do you get people connected? It's not like you can walk around with like a tortoise and, people can meet a frog or a tortoise. Most people are never going to see a mountain lion in their lifetime. So this cutout has been just such a great way, especially for the social media age, to get people to connect to an animal that, they're normally not going to see. We also do a lot of creative things, both that help with fundraising, because a lot of these items are for sale, but also for me, the larger goal is education. And again, getting back to getting people comfortable with coexisting. We did the trading cards of the Cougars of LA. Trading card set, I have to actually work on the next 50 because we're almost up to 100 now. I'm wearing the P22 holiday sweater. We actually meant as one of those ugly holiday sweaters that you could win, the ugly holiday, but actually it came out kind of nice, so I wear it all the time. We have a whole line of t-shirts. Our new product is actually P22's face on that mask, so you can have your own P22. And again, all the proceeds from this go to the wildlife crossing. Our plushie, we did a VR film, which really helped people connect to the crossing, especially students. It was the first VR film that featured an actual mountain lion, but it shows you the crossing and the landscape sort of from a mountain lion's view. So this has really been wonderful, especially to share with kids, to sort of get them interested in it. We also work with a lot of local artists, and one is Jonathan Martinez. He's incredible. His website, Art of the Endangered. A lot of you, remember P56 and how he was killed legally, but still, I think a lot of us questioned why more effort wasn't putting into protecting livestock in that instance. But the good news is he definitely sparked a lot of change all the way up to California Department of Fish and Wildlife saying no more depredation permits. They have to all go through our office. And then, of course, he also is what spurred, the 5-0 vote, which even for California was pretty unprecedented, to advance mountain lions to final protection. We are doing a series of mountain lion murals around the city. This is the first one that went in at Esperanza Elementary School. It's amazing. And our next one is going in Watts, and I'll talk a little bit about our work in Watts in a minute. There's these crazy people who get P22 tattoos, which I love. This is a way that I wouldn't have envisioned people connecting. And I will admit, one of those is mine, the top right. You have kids who, again, relate to him in a meaningful way. I had one parent tell me their son thinks P22 is a superhero, and he goes around with a cape and pretends what P22 would do. They write P22 Valentines. These were actually high school students, which I thought was really fun. We have a hip hop artist, Warren Dixon from Third Rock Hip Hop, who's written a song about P22. And when we do school talks, he comes in and performs and works with the kids. Again, what I love is how we've approached this is it is not my job to tell people how to connect with P22. It's my job to lift up these voices and show the diversity of connections. And I think that's why it's been such a powerful campaign. And that gets me to our Wildlife to Watch. Not everybody can get to Griffith Park. And just because you can't get to Griffith Park doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to connect. So in 2019, we launched our Wildlife to Watch, where we brought P22. We brought some actual wildlife to Watts. And this was such a successful event. yes, yeah, the first two photos there are scenes from 2019. And then this year, obviously, we had to scale back because of the pandemic, but we still did a Wildlife to Watts safely, where we, instead of having a big event, we actually just walked around. That's Dana Stengel from Turanga Ranch, with masks on, walked around Watts, had, lunch at Walksburgers with some wildlife that people could view safely and outdoors. So we're going to be continuing that this year as well. I think one of the funnest outreach, and you saw that video, is Tuesday. It is an official day. Mayor Garcetti and the City Council declared it October 22nd. And we every year hold this. I do a hike that leads up to P22 Day Festival that starts at the site of the crossing and loosely retraces P22's route. I love it. It is such an incredible chance to walk across the LA area. We all drive it all the time. The first section of the hike, as you can see, there is all backbone trail. And as a big hiker, that's really fun part. But for me, the most meaningful piece of this hike is when I hit the 405. The 405 to Griffith Park demonstrates why animals, are having a hard time. There's no sidewalks on Mulholland. I mean, that I make it without being killed is a miracle. And to walk this whole thing with P22, looking at it through P22's eyes, is incredible. I don't know how he made it. I don't know what kept him going. I just don't. I know the route, but he didn't know what was coming, and he's just increasingly going into more and more populated areas and running out of options. I probably would have turned around, but he didn't. Here's the last 2 years posters that we had. The sort of psychedelic one, or the art, that was done actually by this incredible artist, Philip Yarnell, who does all the artwork for the Jimi Hendrix estate. And he also did the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Summer of Love. And when I called him up asking if he would do this, this is what I love about this campaign. It wasn't like, you want me to do what? He's like, oh, sure, sounds fun. A mountain lion and Summer of Love, great, we'll do it. So here's some scenes from 2019 P22 Day. And we, just again, we pay to bus in about 15 students, and we just want to increase that every year. And they're working on, you can see one of those photos, curriculum in the weeks following up to it. And some of them are building wildlife crossings. And although we have famous people there, we really give the students front and center on the stage. This year, of course, like everybody, we had to go virtual. So I thought I would show you, we got creative. And I don't know if any of you attended, but we actually hired some video game people to create a virtual festival experience. And boy, was it cool. I am not a video game player, but I have to say, this was a really cool experience. And we had over 10,000 people show up virtually, which was pretty cool. It was really weird to do this because I was actually in Griffith Park sort of emceeing, but the whole festival was online. It was really weird. I'm going to show you our festival video for this year because it'll show you some interface that we had. Let me see if I can do this. Ooh. There we go. you see were from the actual interface. So you could actually go in, you could play video games and trivia, but the exhibits were there. You had a main stage. We actually ended up, the Black Pumas, who are incredible, ended up playing. They did a custom show for us. Governor Gavin Newsom also gave a talk. It was just a really fun event. It's still up, p22wonderland.org, or go to Save LA Cougars. It's not live, but you can watch the whole 4 hours of the live stage show, or bits of it. You can still do the trivia. The only thing you won't do is accumulate Puma points, but it's still worth checking out. And we're actually going to be doing an event in the spring using the same interface. It was so popular. I could not play that jetpack game, though. I kept getting, I'm not a good video game player. I kept getting bounced out. But anyway, what has this resulted in? And I think, for me, this is where a lot of other conservation groups ask me to, what does it get you? Well, it gets us a lot. One is, all of these things we've been doing, we have over 1 billion media impressions worldwide. Again, people are interested in this crossing all over the world. It's not just here. For me, though, the value system too is what I think the world is watching about LA too. Some of you might remember when P22 decided to munch on one of the cutest animals on the planet, a koala. The LA Zoo, of course, is in Griffith Park, and for him it was a raccoon. And I remember getting the message that morning from the biologist, and I'm like, what? He did what? I never thought in my conservation career I'd have to issue a statement about a mountain lion in Los Angeles eating a koala, but so who knew? But it was interesting because we were a little nervous that morning, because at that point, legally, the zoo would have the right to at least get a depredation permit or call for his removal. But you saw a few voices early, oh my God, he's too dangerous just because he ate a koala. But overwhelmingly, 99% of the people at this point spoke up and said, no way, it's his home. It's not the koala's home. And even the zoo apologized. The zoo said, hey, our bad, our fences weren't high enough. You had, everybody, again, up to Mayor Garcetti, to, the governor saying, no way, it's P22's home. And people writing editorials in his favor. And then you had the national press saying, wait a minute, I love this quote here, like, what's going on with LA? Like, they want to live with an admittedly dangerous predator. And so to me, this is the long game stuff that excites me, is, LA is setting a worldwide model for coexisting with wildlife. It's not perfect, but it's, it's pretty unprecedented in my mind. Any other place in the country, my group, National Wildlife Federation, is national in scope. And I can tell you, any other state, that cat would have been shot or removed upon detection. So I think, it really does a testament to all of you who live there that we want mountain lions on the landscape. I do like to just give a quick, some talks, I do a whole section on this about public safety. Listen, mountain lions are dangerous. They can be, but the risk is so low. I mean, anything can kill you. Ticks can kill you, right? A fellow human being can kill you. Mountain lions being in a human space does not inherently pose a danger any more than another human being in a human space poses a danger. You have to respect them, but there's no reason to fear them. The stats, although, with 40 million people in 100 years, we've had less than 20 attacks, and just 6 of them have been fatal. And of course, we never want them to be fatal. But I just ask that people put the risk in perspective. In California alone, 3,600 people die every year on our freeways. So mountain lions are just way down on the list. We are really not on their menu. I think a lot of you saw that viral video with the runner or hiker, with the mountain lion protecting her young. All of us scientists agree he was in no danger. That cat was doing everything she could to avoid a conflict. Now he didn't know that, so I imagine he was quite scared. But she was really trying to avoid conflict. So these mountain lions, as we know, are not sitting in the woods waiting to pounce on us. The risk is so low. But to me, this is what excites me, is California knows that for the most part, and this movement that everybody, it's not just a few environmentalists or scientists behind closed doors saying we need to do this. This is almost everybody saying we need to do this. And so to me, the proof that this sort of value system shift is working is in the numbers. We've raised $18 million to date. And we really just started publicly for this campaign in 2014. When the environmental documents went out, 8,804 with only 15 against. Those of you who work on public projects or the environmental processes know that is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. 1 billion media impressions, like I said. We have over 2,900 donors from across the world. We have donors from Hong Kong, Florida. Leonardo DiCaprio has given, the Annenberg Foundation. We have a couple in Kansas who have been to LA once in their life. They are retired in their 80s. They never want to come to LA again, but they're so inspired by this project, they've given almost $750,000 to it. So, these are real tangible outcomes to sort of capturing people's imagination. And then, of course, we talked about ESA protection. Even for California, as progressive as we are, a 5-0 vote to pretty much put almost a third to half of the state under ESA protection for mountain lions is a pretty big deal. I testified at the hearing, and when I heard the 5-0 vote, I was like, whoa, that is pretty big. So, this gets back to people want these animals here in care, which to me. But I think I'll end with, to me, actually this isn't the end, but the biggest proof of why this is working. And then I'm just going to give a really brief update on where we're at in the campaign. This to me is the biggest proof, and to me just as important as building the crossing. And I'm just going to play for you some letters that some students read at P22 Day. These students come from a school that is in probably the most densely urbanized area in LA. They're very park deficit there. They don't have a lot of green space. 30% of their parents are undocumented. They go home at night not knowing if their parents are going to be there sometimes. When I was growing up, I was middle class. My problems were a boy didn't like me or I got a bad grade on a test. And the connection to wildlife and nature is what really helped me through it. These kids deserve the same. And I think P22 is doing that for them. So let me just play you this brief clip.
My letter starts with...
I'm going to skip a little for time. There we go.
My letter to P22 is, Dear P22, I know that you have been poisoned by rat poison. You should always try to watch your food, not always eat dead things. I don't think that the tracking device will hurt you. It will help you stay safe. I feel bad for you. I know how it feels to be lonely, sad, and scared. I've been there before. I hope you have a mate to be happy and peace and love. P22. How did it feel like to be in Santa Monica Mountains? How about in Griffith Park? Did you have a mate in Santa Monica Mountains? How lonely do you feel? Love or little too much? Thank you.
That was these festivals. I always, have hiked 50 miles to get there. And that little boy said, I know how it feels to be scared and sad and lonely. And I just burst into tears. It just was astounding. So we're reaching the kids and giving them something that, for us, I think we take for granted. So for me, that's amazing. So let me end with sort of an update on the project real quick, where we're at, like the real tangibles. First of all, I have to recognize this is an incredible partnership. NWF is just one of 5 main partners. And of course, it takes a village. There's way more people who are obviously contributing to this, but these 5 are the ones living and breathing it every day. Like daily. The National Park Service, again, if it wasn't for their research, we wouldn't know we'd need a crossing. We wouldn't know where to put it. We wouldn't know that the mountain lions were having a problem. So, they're incredibly vital to this. Caltrans, it's their road. They've been wonderful. I mean, really, they've just said, we want to build it. We just don't have a budget. Get us the money. They've been an incredible partner and really care about the wildlife as well. The Resource Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains, they bring an enormous amount of knowledge about the area and the native vegetation, how to obviously restore landscapes, things like that. And not only will they, have they helped with the design of the crossing, but obviously part of this project is looking at restoring the landscape surrounding it, which is just as important. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, they were preserving land with sort of the notion of wildlife corridors before corridors were even sort of a thing. I mean, I really have to give it to them their visionary approach. And so the land on both sides is theirs, and the land atop the crossing will be obviously under their responsibility as well. They are incredible. And then my organization, the National Wildlife Federation, we came on to sort of the last piece in the puzzle, which was the education, advocacy, outreach, and then of course the fundraising, the biggest piece. You know, I talked about this a little bit. The campaign really involves building the crossing, but it's a little more. You know, we want to also, we're looking at the science. This is also setting a model for urban wildlife conservation. This has just never been done before. You look at other crossings. The Utah one, for example, I think they get 10,000 cars a day. We get 300,000. We're having to design this for things these other wildlife crossings wouldn't even think of, like sound and light barriers, things like that. So this is really informing and inspiring crossings all over the world, but also the education and outreach. How do you get people to support these things? It's an $85 million campaign, as you've probably seen on our website. And what that goes to support, the majority of that is right to Caltrans to build this thing or to design it, which is where we are now. Obviously the education outreach, but also part of that is we're creating $1 million plus endowments, one for the mountain lion research for the Park Service. Their research is not funded year to year. And also for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, as we talked about, part of the goal of the campaign is to get them an endowment so that they will have resources to, again, over time, take care of the landscape atop it, which isn't going to require as much as a native landscape, but still some. So where we're at, there's 4 phases to this, which is not unique to this crossing. These are Caltrans phases. And a lot of people, we get a lot of comments, why is this taking so long? And I totally can identify if you're not working on this a lot, but I'll tell you, and a lot of you have probably worked on public-private projects, to go from an idea to pretty much we are looking at breaking ground in November in less than 10 years is insane. When I was working in Yosemite, the Yosemite Valley Visitor Center, new one, took 40 years, right? So this is really racing ahead, but there's no getting around. You're building the largest wildlife crossing in the world and have to go through all the steps that Caltrans goes through. It's not like, you know, building a house on private property. So feasibility study, first stage you have to do for any Caltrans project. The MRCA funded it in 2015, done. Environmental assessment, need to do that Caltrans project. Save LA Cougars, we wrote a grant to the SCC. It was successful, funded, and this was completed in 2018. Final design and engineering cost about $8.7 million. We're underway. Final design and engineering is underway. I go to meetings weekly. We are paying the bills. We are almost done with fundraising for this. 7 million, we got 8.7 million total to go. So this is pretty much almost done. And indeed, the blueprints should be produced this spring. So that's coming up quick. Construction, we don't know the final construction costs until you get the blueprints done. The environmental documents produced an estimate. As part of the environmental documents, you have to design to 30%. Again, I had to learn all this for Caltrans. So once we get the final blueprints, we'll have a final, but they had to estimate a range anywhere between 55 and 78. From what I'm seeing, at least at this point, as the design is progressing, it probably won't be the high end of 78. We actually think it's going to come in lower just from, one of the things we did, I named those 5 partners, but who I neglected to name was we realized after the environmental documents were done, none of us had built a crossing before, not NWF, not the Park Service, not Caltrans. So we brought in some of the top experts in the world to work and collaborate with Caltrans on the crossing. And these are the people who built the Banff crossings and otherwise. So they're really helping us, with design, saving costs where we can. But I do want to stress, this is not a low cost project. We have to do what's best to get the animals across the road, but we are trying to save costs wherever we can. So we already have $5 million from the Wildlife Conservation Board for construction. They voted on that in August. And then my job is to raise, which, although it sounds like a big gap at this point, these are donors we've been talking to for years. A lot of them have stipulations, either foundations have, either policies that they don't give until you get to final design or till you get to a certain percentage of design. So although it seems like a big gap, at this point, we've raised 18 million. We have to about 85 to go. The gifts we've been talking to are in the 30 million and $10 million range. And again, these have been conversations for years. Now, I won't lie, the world situation definitely is a challenge we didn't think we would, didn't predict. But we are plowing full speed ahead, and I still feel very good about breaking ground in the fall. So just to show you in 2020, which was the most challenging year I think most of us have experienced in our lifetime, and certainly a very challenging year for fundraising. We still raised 3.8 million. So people are still very invested and care about this project. And to me, I'll end with, this is what it's about. This is some of the new kittens. I know you used this photo for, sort of the photo for the event. This might be one of the first kittens to use the crossing. This is coming, as my colleague, Senator Fran Pavley, who's since retired but works with us on this, says it's no longer an if, but a when. So you're all invited to the groundbreaking this fall in November 2020. I'm going to be working to hit that with everything I have. But this is just such an incredible project. The LA area is really setting a model for the world, and that's all of you with coexistence. And, there's a lot of negative these days, but I think actually National Geographic a couple weeks ago said they named this the top thing to give us hope or to look forward to in 2021, which was getting this crossing underway. So thank you for your time tonight. I am happy to stay as long as you want to answer questions. Let me start, and my email address and cell phone numbers there. If I don't get to it, feel free to email me. I'm always happy to answer questions or take comments. I don't know who's going to moderate. David, is that you, questions, or how do we want to handle this? Let me know.
All right. Wow. Great presentation and wonderful, good news about the wildlife crossing. Thank you so much. Really wonderful presentation, and high fives on all the work that you're doing. We have tons of questions.
Okay. Yeah, let me stop the share. I'll just share it again if we have a graphic I want to use. That way I can see people a little better. So
yeah, great job. And so exciting to see the kids involved. I mean,
yeah. I will tell you that, to me, that is just as important as building the crossing. Like it is just as important. So yeah.
Yeah, well, you're touching so many people with this campaign, and it's maybe doing us more good than it is the Cougars, but
yeah, I agree. Yep.
So the first question, how many mountain lions are in the Santa Monica Mountains?
That's a really good question. And the National Park Service will tell you we don't know. We don't even know how many mountain lions are in California, but we have a good guess both in the Santa Monica Mountains and in California, or anywhere mountain lions are. And that, remember, I told you they don't share territory, right? Unlike sort of coyotes or raccoons, or they are not going to overpopulate or share space. Because they also don't eat our human food. Like, coyotes can eat our trash and eat our dog food we use out. Mountain lions are obligate carnivores. They want deer, or they want, deer-like, or a coyote or something. So they are not sort of as adaptable in our human spaces as far as like being reliant on human food. So bottom line is they're not really going to be in numbers we don't predict. So if you take sort of average territory size for a mountain lion, and you look at California, and about 50% of California is suitable mountain lion territory, the number that I have seen has been about 4,000 to 6,000 throughout the state. What's exciting is the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has hired a biologist a couple of years ago, Justin. He's wonderful, to sort of conduct the first, at least study about how many we think are here. It's pretty much the same thing in the Santa Monica Mountains. Jeff and Seth, as part of the Park Service study, have about maybe 10 at any one time they're tracking. That's probably about a good estimate given the territory size and what the territory can sustain. but there's a few out there I'm sure we don't know about. So again, the answer is I don't know, but probably if you're talking about it, maybe 10 to 15, in the broader area. Again, you're just not going to see an overabundance of mountain lions.
Cool. Thank you. Next question. How is P22 doing today? Is he still around? Yeah. So what's his status?
He's doing great. One of the reasons he looks so handsome, if you look at, those of you who have cats, this too, right? Tomcats, all scarred up. Same thing with mountain lions. You look at mountain lions, his age and the, others, and, they're all battle scarred because they've had to fight for territory. Well, he doesn't have to fight for territory. That's one of the reasons he looks so handsome and pretty. But he's doing great. I just saw some recent footage of him from a week ago. Again, I think he's really figured out Griffith Park and how to live, and he's probably not, he knows he's not going to have a girlfriend, although, for mountain lions, it's probably not as hardship as, they are kind of a love them and leave them bunch. They mate for a couple days and that's it. And, the mountain lions have no paternal instincts. They do not at all participate as a dad. So I think he's okay, or at least he has, sort of told himself bachelor life isn't so bad. But I will tell you this, he hasn't given up. Miguel Ordiana, who works for the Natural History Museum, the person who discovered the first photo of P22 as part of a study, a lot of the cameras have sound now, obviously. Mountain lions, of course, are very quiet. They're called ghost cats, except for when they're mating and then they scream, but otherwise they are very quiet. But again, much like a house cat, so you've probably heard them do like little chirping noises, right? My cat does it. Mountain lions have one for that is, hey, is anybody out there? And he still does that,
So it's possible that once what the lifespan of a mountain lion is, but 22 could get a date?
There is a mountain lion uncollared that has been hanging around between the 405 and the 101. He has not crossed the 101. It's a male, so that would be interesting if he got across the 101, because then you have two males who, I don't know that P22 would necessarily win in a fight to the death, right? So that's going to be sort of interesting to watch. But females don't tend to travel as much, so I think it's pretty unlikely a female's going to reach him. I think it's unlikely that other cat would get across the 101, but I never say never with wildlife. But in terms of age, we get asked a lot, well, how old is he and how old does mountain lions live? He was discovered in 2012. They thought he was about 2. Obviously, we don't know for sure. And so, he's getting up there. He's 10, mountain lions 10 to 13 in the wild is usually about, the range. But here's the thing. He's not in captivity, but he's not exactly in the wild. The biggest drains on male mountain lions is having to fight and defend their territory. So if I had to predict, I think he'll live a little longer. If he can stay away from the rat poison and, he obviously is pretty good at staying away from the cars, mountain lions in captivity can live to 25, 30. So I think he'll sort of go on the, go past what a wild mountain lion would typically do. He looks great. Like for a mountain lion his age, he's got plenty of fat on him. He looks great.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so next question is, you talked about this hike that sort of recreates the journey that P22 took to get to Griffith Park. How long is that, and how long does it take for somebody to hike it?
Yeah, it's about 50 miles. The hike itself, I mean, a lot of you who are hikers or myself, I could 2 to 3 days, you could probably do it. Again, about 50 miles. But because we sort of tie events to it along the way, I break it up over about 5 days. So I'm happy to share the route map with anybody. It's a really cool hike to do. Again, once you get past the 405, it becomes interesting because you're like, what? But it's a pretty incredible hike to do, especially like one of the pieces that gives me that just instills my sense of wonder is that first view of Griffith Park that he would, like it's on the Backbone Trail, and you're like, wow, he saw that and kept going. Like, you know, what a cat. But yeah, it takes about, and I actually wear a mountain lion collar to track me the whole time. So that's kind of fun as well. But it's a great hike. I'm happy to share the route. It's basically sort of Malibu Creek State Park to the Backbone Trail to Mulholland to the 405, and then you, and then you take Mulholland the whole way to Griffith Park.
Great. That must be quite an experience, just to see what he went through to get where he got.
The one thing I shall say, you know, we talk about connectivity a lot for wildlife, but it's just as important for people. And Mulholland is a travesty. You have all those great parks there. You have Franklin Park and Running, you know, you can't connect them. There are people trying. There's no sidewalks, but because of private access as well, you can't, you know, we tried the first year, 2016, we scouted. There's no way to connect those parks. You have to come out back on Mulholland to get to them, which is ridiculous. And there are people trying to walk down Mulholland, like people who live there, and there's no sidewalks. So they're walking on like people's front yards and having to dodge traffic. So connectivity is just, you know, something just as important for people in these areas as well. And boy, some areas of LA have none. Sorry, but yeah, that's another thing to really highlight.
So I'm thrilled to tell you that Martha Groves from the LA Times, or formerly from the LA Times, was on the call, the Zoom tonight, and she's got a question about.
There's Martha.
Okay. She's got a question about the funding. You know, it seems like a tall mountain to climb with all of, you know, 55 to 78 million for the actual construction, and wondered, you know, maybe Eli Broad could, you know, check and see if he's got some spare change to help out. And you know, was curious, how do you see bridging that huge gap? Where do you expect that huge amount of funding to come from? And if you're breaking ground in the fall, you know, for example, how long would it take to actually build it, assuming that the money is available?
Sure. Well, first, everybody on this call needs to give Martha a hand, because Martha is not just an LA Times reporter, but the LA Times reporter who broke the P-22 story. So we wouldn't even have a Wildlife Crossing or campaign if she hadn't sort of give him a little help on his step to fame. The first headline was literally, I think, Martha, mountain lion makes a home in Griffith Park. So we owe it to Martha that we have a famous Brad Pitt of the mountain lions. So thank you, Martha. And that is literally what got me involved in the campaign. I was writing a book at the time for my job about California wildlife. And the book, as we know, became P-22. He's on the cover, Would Mountain Lions Are Neighbors, but didn't start out that way. And it was Martha's story I read, and I'm like, there is no way that's true. I ended up calling up, she quoted Jeff in it, and asking Jeff to give me a tour of, you know, to tell me about P-22. He ended up giving me a tour of Griffith Park. And at the end, I asked him, how can I help? This is incredible. And literally Jeff said, there's this kind of wildlife crossing we're trying to get built. I'm like, oh, sure. How hard can it be? Not knowing it would take over my life. But we all have Martha to thank for recognizing the specialness of P-22 and giving him a headline. So thank you, Martha. It's a good question. And I think, you know, for a capital campaign, let's just to give you some idea, like we have an ask out in the $30 million range, right? So that, you know, that gap gets closed pretty quickly if some of these donors that, again, that we've been talking to for years come through. So that's one of the things that a lot of the asks that we're, you know, these conversations have been going on for a long time. And again, as you get closer to the finish line, that's where the donors, it was sort of this catch-22, right? Nobody wants to give to planning, but you have to do the planning before you can get to construction. And that's where the state really stepped up. We always envisioned this campaign to be about 80% private and 20% public. And again, the public money by design was always money that had to be spent on conservation. So there was no diversion of dollars from bridge repair or hospitals or anything like this. It was only conservation funds. But the planning was really the opposite, because you just can't give, private donors are not as apt to give to the planning phases. Because again, as I mentioned, a lot of them have to reach thresholds. So we're closer to those thresholds. And these conversations are advancing exponentially rather than sort of linearly, because we're closer to those thresholds. So listen, it's going to be challenging, but we do have things in the queue that keep me hopeful that we will, or even thinking that we will meet those targets. Against sort of all odds at the beginning, we keep hitting every fundraising target. So if these conversations advance as they have been, I think we'll meet that. Again, I'd say the only thing that if we didn't have the year we just had, I'd be a lot more confident about that, right? We don't know what's going to happen in a month, but on the other hand, we're on track to, we keep remaining on track to hit it. And as Martha knows, I'm not sleeping until we hit it. So, but again, thank you, Martha. It's great to see you. And again, thanks for bringing us P22.
Well, thank you so much for all you're doing. Assuming that the money, those conversations,
yes. Mm-hmm.
How long will it take?
Yeah, so assuming the money comes in, we will be breaking ground in fall of 2021. It's going to be a staggered process. I mean, this is listen, I actually have a lead AP. I did green building, but nothing of this scope. This is a monumental engineering feat. I sit in these engineering meetings. I understand about half of what the engineers say, but enough to know this is complex. So there's to do this right, they're staggering it. So the first thing that's going to start is that 101 portion that I showed you, right? Because it's going over the 101 and then an access road. So that's going to start in 2021. It's going to take about 1.5 years to 2 years. Halfway through that, they're going to start on the Agora Road portion. That probably take about 1 year, maybe 1.5 years. So 3, maybe 4, I think more on the 3.5 before the whole thing is done. So.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Let's see. Have I missed any questions, John? Oh, okay. There's a lot more actually. John, let's see here. Here's a question. How will the crossing differ from existing crossings in Utah and I guess it's in Alberta? I've been on the Calgary to Banff Highway and where the elk crossings are, which seem pretty small. I mean, not as big as what is being envisioned here. Right. So what are the differences?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference is size, right? So, I've been to a lot of these crossings. It's incredible to see them. I went up to Banff. And again, we have the biologist and some of the people who worked on those Banff. So we have their, decades of expertise. I've been to some in Colorado. I've been to the Utah one that you saw in the viral video. The biggest difference is size. You look at those, they're only covering like a 4-lane freeway. Ours, again, is 10 lanes of pavement and an access road. So, and how that plays into how you have to design the crossing is, listen, the animals have to feel safe. They have to think they're not going over a freeway, because we have an enormous amount of roadkill, obviously, in this country, but animals really don't want to use the road. And as much roadkill as we have, there's a lot of animals that even avoid it, right? Don't even take that first step. So you have to trick animals, or at least not trick, but, make them feel like they are not going over the freeway. Now, if you're designing a, crossing over a 2-lane road in Idaho, and I visited one of these, it was for deer, they were really doing a single species, which is fine. Again, every crossing has a different goal. It was pretty small and it had chain link fence up. Well, the DOT guy there was like, hey, we have a busy road. We get 10,000 cars a year. And I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? We get 300,000 cars a day, right? So we're having to design for things that those crossings aren't, such as noise and, light. So, and the science around crossing tells you to sort of, again, make it look more like a natural landscape. For every foot long you have to make it, you have to widen it to a certain extent, so the animals really can't see the freeway. So that is probably the biggest difference. The other thing, again, getting at sound and light, like the noise alone on the approach on the, we're actually having to put up, some of these can get away with, and I've been on them, a chain link fence. Like the animal, it doesn't matter if they see the road because there's not as much traffic, but because of the sound and light, we're actually having to build a vegetated sound wall, which is actually pretty cool. I'm learning a lot about how sound travels, and especially in this area, what they call the canyon effect, right? It's not just as easy as putting up a one sound wall in one place. So there's a lot that's going into this. And then I'd say the other decision we made early on as part of the feasibility study in the environmental document was we didn't just want this to be for mountain lions. Now, again, you know, some of these crossings are just for elk or just for, and so we have a team that's working on this, is making sure like there's good amphibian habitat on top of it and good, you know, it's more about reconnecting the entire ecosystem. So that is, you know, there's a lot of engineering considerations that are different. The last thing I'll tell you, which I learned, is you look at some of these crossings, they're in the middle of nowhere, right? So what they do is really, all right, where's the easiest place to engineer and build that? Caltrans didn't have that luxury. We only got one spot. And this is not, as you can see from those photos, a straight shot across the freeway like those Banff ones are or others. It's angled and you have to grade it, and it is engineering very complicated. And so that's another way it's differing. So it's been interesting to look at some of these other crossings. Again, some of them have different goals. And a lot of what happened has informed ours. But some of it we're pretty much going to be, you know, providing some new design applications, especially for urbanized areas.
That's great. Here's a question. Will people be allowed to walk over the wildlife crossing?
No, they will. Well, I mean, here's where it gets, you know, you can't fence it off or else the wildlife won't use it. But we are hoping people will do, you know, the right thing and stay off. So this was an interesting thing that came up in the environmental document, where actually the scientists were saying, well, if, you know, people use it here and there, these aren't animals that, you know, like if you put a crossing up in the middle of Wyoming, the wildlife there are not used to people. But you do have, you know, like P22 uses human trails. So the early thinking was it might be a multi-use structure, because the scientists were saying, you know, it probably will be okay. Not, you know, you don't want streams of people. But this is where we listen to the public. The public did not want it to be. The environmental documents, there was a lot of comments about keeping it just for wildlife. So we honored that. But we are going to have to, you know, use some tricks. I actually have been asking some other crossings what they do, and planting poison oak seems to be a good one. Lots of signs about rattlesnake danger. so you know, we are going to use some tricks of the trade to keep people from using it. Because listen, even if you had the occasional hiker go over, it's absolutely, you don't want this to become heavily used by people. It just, you know, that would not be true to what the intent of the project is.
Right.
But you can look at one in Texas. They did one, and again, this is in Armenia. They actually added sort of a side path for people. It was really interesting. But you know, that project was a little different. So I think I agree. Wildlife should be front and center with this project.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so there's now a whole like set of chat messages in the chat, and people are trying to figure out how to get P22 a date. And they're wondering if someone would please pick up a nice female mountain lion and drop her off in his territory. So is that an option?
All right. How many of us have been on blind dates, right? Worst outcome there is you split the check if it doesn't work out and go your merry way, and you have a fun story to tell your friends about how, you know, the person had rude manners or something. Well, mountain lion blind dates can end in death. So I think that's one of the things. If P22 doesn't like his date, that might not end well for the poor female. Also, Griffith Park just isn't, moving mountain lions too is extremely risky, right? We get asked a question too. Well, why don't you just move mountain lions instead of building a wildlife crossing? Well, you'd have to do that forever, right? And you could move a mountain lion and they could die the next day. You need free, you need passage that is sustainable, and the mountain lions are going to use in perpetuity, or else you'd have to move mountain lions forever. But moving them is always a last resort. It's risky. That female could, you're plopping her down in a strange place. It's not her territory. She could just try to get out of there and run across the freeway and get killed. So as much as I would love him to at least experience a couple one-night stands before, he goes to wherever cougars go in the sky, I think it's risky for you're putting mountain lions at risk at that point.
All right.
So let me just say this. I gave that answer to some fifth graders once, like, well, blind, I didn't state it quite that way, but blind dates don't always go as well. You might not like her. And he raised his hand again. I have a follow-up question, Miss Pratt. I'm like, what? He's like, well, why don't you bring 3 in? That was adorable. I'm like, that's a good idea. We'll think about that.
Yeah. The Bachelorette show or something. Okay. Plenty. Well, we all care about Cougar, P22. So we want the best for him. So in that vein, people are asking, obviously they could go to your website and figure out a way to donate for the wildlife crossing and be able to say that they helped make it possible. But are there other ways that folks can help besides making a monetary donation?
Yeah, there's a number of ways you can help. I mean, first of all, just getting the word out, right? This campaign, and again, a lot of our large donations were fueled by seeing how many small donations there were, but also just seeing how many people were passionate about this campaign. So literally, something is just sharing the story on your social media page or telling people about it, or that makes such a difference. The more people know, the more people know, and that helps with not just getting fundraising, but when we do have to go out for things like ESA protection or environmental review, just more people caring helps. We do have a volunteer program. It's been all virtual. In fact, our volunteers who showed up at P22 Day in person every year found themselves being the testers for our virtual program. It was fun. It was sort of a fun difference for them. But we do have volunteer opportunities if people want to volunteer their time. And that's, everything from when we do get back to events, helping out in those to, again, sometimes we just tailor it. If we have someone who just loves to write, obviously that's something we can utilize. So I think those are the 2, biggest ways. It's just not about donations. When we do, we don't have to, the thing about this campaign, which is a little different, usually volunteers are advocacy and letter writing, and I had no bad guy to fight. There was no bad guy here, right? The land was protected. Caltrans, who this road is like, we're in, just get us the money. So unlike some other, conservation work I've done throughout my career, there was nobody to fight. That was kind of a nice change, right? So there isn't that typical advocacy volunteer work that you typically have. But listen, please, Liberty Canyon is just the start, right? I'm looking at the 5, we're looking at the 118, we're looking at, it's not going to be the only one. And some of those don't have all the, ducks in a row. So please, even if, get in touch with us, just go to the Cougars site. You can sign up for our email. It's saveLACougars.org, our email list. We advertise volunteer opportunities. So helping to get the word out is very important as well. And then again, if you have time, as these volunteer opportunities come up, we'd love your help. And and if you don't want to donate, you can at least buy Cougar swag. You can go to our store and buy some of that Cougar swag. It makes great gifts, and all of it, 100% goes to the wildlife crossing.
Well, this has just been a wonderful evening and so encouraging. A great way to start 2021 on a positive note. And really want to thank you, Beth, for all your work and for being with us this evening. It's really a thrill to think about how we can really make a difference for you know, these iconic, beautiful creatures to have a path forward into the future. So
thank you.
Thanks
I just put my email in the chat box. If you didn't get your question answered, please feel free to email me. But I'm going to put the thanks back to you. I mean, all of you. We would not be getting this crossing built if it wasn't for obviously P22 and people loving him. But, you know, those in charge, those who have the checkbooks noticed the incredible public support, and that's back on all of you. So thank you for making my job easy.
All right, well, let's give Beth a big wave and have a wonderful rest of the evening and take care.
Thanks,
really
everybody. Thanks for coming.